Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen today. We are talking about salsa macha. Now that may not be a salsa that you've even heard of. And when you look at it, it will really remind you of that chili oil that you find in a lot of Asian restaurants. Now, as far as I understand, salsa macha actually comes from the side of Mexico where a whole lot of Chinese settled back in the late 1800s and into the beginning of the 1900s. So perhaps they brought this to it, or perhaps they saw it in Mexico and took it back to China. Who knows exactly what happened, but this is an oil-based salsa that is made with dried chilies, and it almost always will have some nuts in it, maybe some seeds like sesame seeds, and then it will have some garlic in it. I'm going to show you how I approach this one because it's one for those of you that feel comfortable working with dried chilies. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to heat some olive oil. It's a oil-based salsa. I think it's just way better if you do it in olive oil, but a lot of people will do it in vegetable oil, so you could feel free to do that. We're going to put this over a kind of medium-low heat, and I'm going to pour the olive oil in there. And then I'm going to add the nuts that are going to go in here, which is going to be peanuts, a very classic ingredient to go into a salsa macha. And I'm going to add a whole lot of garlic. Okay, so these are whole peeled cloves of garlic. We're going to cook them very slowly because remember, I'm over a medium-low heat here. Raw peanuts are going in there. If yours are toasted, they would go in at the very end here when we put the sesames in there. We're just going to let that coast along. It's almost like a confit-like process there while we talk about the chilies. So many different chilies can go in this. I think the original one, because this is called salsa macha, would have been made all with arbol chilies, which are super, super hot. So you would have to be very macho to eat that salsa. But I'm going to put 3 of them in there. Then we have the smooth-skinned guajillo chilies, medium spicy, and the really nutty cascabel chilies. Basically, you're looking for a certain weight of chilies here to work with, and when you get that weight, depending on what kind of chilies, dried chilies you can lay your hands on or like, you will treat them all the same way, which is to open them up, pull out the veins and the seeds. You'll see with this, the cascabels, they're kind of a funny shape, but you can do exactly the same thing. Tear them open and then get the seeds and the veins out of them. You don't have to be terribly meticulous in this. And then we've got the arbol. I've just done one of each one. Before we go on to toasting them in the oil in just a minute, we're going to cut everything into smaller pieces. Now that's not going to be the size of the pieces in the finished salsa macha. We're going to achieve that in a different way. But just so that the toasting is very even, I'm going to make them into about 1/2 inch pieces here. Again, you don't have to be meticulous on this part of it at all. And I'm making a sort of modest amount of salsa macha here, but this stuff will keep forever. So I always have some in my refrigerator. A little of this in practically any dish will really make a change for the better. Okay, so we're going to keep going with all of these chilies until we have them done. And this takes about 10 minutes to get that garlic completely soft and beginning to brown. And we'll come back and we'll continue on with the process. The garlic is brown now and it's completely soft. The peanuts have darkened just a little bit, indicating to me that they are where they need to be. We have our sesame seeds that's going to go in there. And then we have our 2 ounces of the chilies that have been stemmed, seeded, and cut up into smaller pieces here. And what I'm going to do at this point is to stir this until the sesame toasts and the chilies toast. That really doesn't take much more than about 1.5 minutes or so, but you can really smell it. You can also see that the chilies are toasting because the interior of the chilies turns a lighter color, But boy, you use basically your olfactory senses here, because I'm starting to smell the sesame toasting beautifully here, and the chilies. So it looks like it's just about done now. At least my nose is telling me that it's done. So I'm going to take it off the fire here and add the other seasonings that go into it. It's going to take about a half a teaspoon or so of salt for this. We can adjust that later. And then I'm going to put a couple of tablespoons of vinegar. Now, I like a dark vinegar in this because I think it really pops it. Some people make it with no vinegar at all, but I think that's a little... It's not as palatable to me. A dark vinegar like balsamic, or what I'm using here, is a sweet sherry vinegar that's made with the Pedro Jimenez grape in Spain. So I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons. Again, this would be to suit your own taste. And at the same time, I'm going to add in here a 1/4 cup of water, and that will help to distribute the flavorings, meaning the salt primarily, because it'll dissolve that. Salt won't dissolve in the oil, but once it's all dissolved and all that, but we're going to let it cool completely. And then I'm going to use an immersion blender, though you could do this in a regular blender as well, to get it all chopped up much more finely. But we need to have this cool before we go on to do that. Okay, I'm going to put all of this mixture for the salsa macha into a bowl that's going to make it a little bit deeper, because I'm using this immersion blender. If you're using your regular blender here, all you're going to want to do is to just pour it in and start pulsing, okay? And I'm kind of going to be pulsing this thing into the mixture. Okay, it's just about what I like for this. There'll be some coarse pieces, but certainly all of the peanuts are chopped up. You'll see whole pieces of sesame in there, but the chilies and the garlic certainly will be all kind of chopped up. And it should be sort of fine, I think, with a little bit of coarseness mixed in there. And then you can put it into a container that you can store easily. I'm putting it into a 1-quart mason jar, and you'll notice that there is enough oil to cover it. That's what I'm looking for here, because it's really the solids that I'm after when I'm going to use this as a garnishing salsa on things. And I'll tell you, this is a really great one to have in your repertoire, because if you just want to do some simple grilled fish, maybe some scallops, this is the perfect thing to just drizzle over the top, and it will just take that flavor of that dish over the top as well. It's a great salsa to have in your arsenal, and since it keeps well, it's going to be always ready at a moment's notice. Enjoy making salsa macha.